And just real quick, that's why a lot of the guys in the old days, you'd try to go out and look at the crowd and eyeball the house, see what your payoff was, right? And some guys were good at it and some guys weren't. But a lot of people don't realize that the amount of each price level tickets in every building is different, even if they're not changing the prices around. And roughly, that's why to figure out an average ticket price, round number, if there's 10,000 seats in a building, let's say 8,000 of them are general admission, and they're $10. That means that's 80 grand. And then let's say there's 1,500 reserve seats at $20. There's 30 grand. That's 110. And there's 500 ringside seats at $50. There's 25 grand. So there's how you figure your house. But if many of the general admission tickets are sold and those seats are full, but nobody's in the expensive ones, then your average ticket price goes way down. So the same number of people pay less money. Or in the old days when you had a bad house, but most of the people that did come were the dedicated fans that wanted to be ringside or as close as possible, and general admission, they'd be shooting deer in the balcony. You might not have a lot of people, but your average ticket price was up because the ones that were there spent more money overall on average on the tickets. So to figure out a house, you have to know not only how many people are in the building, but how the building is set up and where the reserve seats are and et cetera, et cetera. And that's why I always tried to take that into account when figuring. We always used to ask the house, the gate. That's all we cared about. We didn't want to know how many people were there. What's the house? $82,000. Okay, question asked and answered. They wouldn't say 7,942 people. We didn't give a shit. So when going back and trying to figure out how many people were actually at these shows to give a statistic that the regular fans can, kind of identify with, that is where it became necessary to try to figure out, what was the average ticket and what were they paying back then. And I started recording some of the ticket prices in my book toward the end of '84 when I realized, me being the little greenhorn rookie that I was, that the higher the ticket prices, the higher the potential gate and the higher payoff I hopefully was going to get. And generally then we got the formula that I was talking about earlier, the 6 or 7% or whatever. And like I said, Tulsa was light, but you'd get a better payoff if you did a big house in a town that never drew. Rock and Roll and Midnight sold out the Township Auditorium in Columbia, South Carolina for the first time in, I think, 8 years in 1986. And it was only a $32,000 house or whatever, but Crockett was so fucking thrilled he gave us $1,000 apiece. So the main event got $5,000 on a $30,000 house.
Later on, he may have regretted being so willy-nilly with his money.
Well, he may have been willy there, but he was nilly on some of the other ones to make up for it. But that was the thing is, and that's, I've told the story where once I got kind of good at eyeballing it and figuring out what the house was going to be and then transferring that into seeing the promoter's payoff patterns and knowing what our check was going to be, when Bobby'd get in the ring, he'd grab a hold on somebody and I'd be, at the start of the match, I'd be looking at the crowd and I'd lean with my elbow on the apron of the ring and I'd hold up on the side of my cheek the number of fingers indicating what our payoff was going to be. If it was 2-finger, $200, okay, I'll hold a while longer. If I put up 4 or 5 fingers, $400 or $500, he'd get up and do a little high spot. But if I used my left hand and put the 1 up, that means it was a $1,000 payoff, and he'd get up and start doing everything in sight. And mostly I was pretty close.
Were there guys, like from when you first got into the business, that would stand and, at the very beginning of the show, they would just be there counting? They knew how many people could sit in a certain section, and they would just try to figure it out just so they can have a chance to argue over their money, I guess?
Well, yes. And I mean, they wouldn't be you couldn't count individually in those days because these were big fucking buildings, but you could eyeball and you could see who was sitting where and how many overall. And of course, a lot of the guys didn't go into the mathematics that I did. So they just would yell, "God damn, we got fucked. There must have been 8,000 people there." Actually, there was probably 5,500 and, it's about normal. Whatever. and some were really good at it. Obviously, Flair got used to seeing so many big crowds that he could pretty much come close. That's why, I've said this many times in Philadelphia in '86, the Veterans Stadium Bash, the fucking crowd me and Ric Flair both saw, and the ticket prices that we were told, there was a six-figure discrepancy and something going on there. And we never solved it to this day. Elliot Murnick's gone now, I guess, so we'll never know. But something happened. I think I either said or Rick said they may have taken the goddamn expenses for the whole tour out of Philly that first night. Everything else I kind of agreed with in terms of what we were told versus what was there and what happened and et cetera. But Philly was that Veterans Stadium. It was almost 2 civic centers worth of people. And I think they reported $210,000 at $50 and $20 tickets. So yeah, they were off about 100, 125.
Welcome to the Northeast.
There you have it.
Well, there you have it.
Well, take it back.
I will not take anything.
All right.
This is your show.
We're finished with Rob. Should we move on to modern times? Jesus Christ.
The Chaplin movie?
No, unfortunately not. AEW's Modern Times.
The Chaplin movie?
only if it was fucking Sidney Chaplin instead of Charlie. Or maybe the Robert Downey Jr. version. And I'm going to say one more thing before we move on about the Tulsa and Oklahoma City and Gates and drawing power and etc. There's a lot of people say, Cornette never drew any money. He just talks big. There's a lot of people say, well, I drew this or I did that. And some of them even might be true. But I'll guarantee you one record that will never be broken. The Midnight Express and Watts and Dog in one day, between 2 p.m. and 10 p.m. that night in Tulsa and Oklahoma City for the last Stampede, had 2 shows that sold 20,000 tickets, turned 5,000 people away, and drew $150,000, which is well over $400,000 in today's money, in fucking Oklahoma on a Sunday afternoon. Beat that. Fuck all y'all.